So partnerships, man, that's such a really tricky question. In fact, it really screwed Brian and I up early on. As an entrepreneur, I had my own definition of what a partner was, what a business partner was. Actually, I aspired to be a business partner because I thought that was a really cool thing. I was an entrepreneur. I was going to put in my own money. I was going to have all kinds of control over my ideas. And so business partner is kind of a thing, right? And so I had an expectation that when I was shopping around for my next endeavor, where I was going to spend my time, energy, and talent, I was shopping for a business partner. And I looked to this guy. And it's actually one of the fundamental tensions that both Brian and I held as conventional at the time in 2006-07, conventional entrepreneurs starting new things. We held many tensions between us, but this was one of the tensions that we processed into an incremental point of clarity. And that clarity got encoded in the Constitution. That's why partner is there. So we're all partners. So who's a partner in an organization? Yeah, right? Who has a partner? Intimate partner? Right? Who has business partners? Yeah, so what's up with this whole notion of partner and partnership?
Tom, can I ask too? So how does it, like, for those people who might not know and still are kind of trying to understand, how is it distinct from like the role structure, right? So when you pull up Glassfrog, you can see an organization. So that's like an organization structure. What does the partnership structure look like? What's an example of like a partnership structure?
Well, it's actually invisible. So you're not looking at a partnership structure. You're looking at partners who fill roles by virtue of being members of circles, right? So you're not looking at a partnership structure encoded in the Constitution. There are rules about duties of partnership, for sure. That gets encoded. But you're not looking at a partnership structure, per se. You're looking at a structure of what? The work. So when you look in Glassfrog, you're looking at a structure of purpose, a holarchic structure of purpose around the work, not a partnership. So this is a really tricky thing.
I want to also hear, so Brian, I'm curious your answer to kind of that same question. Like, how would you describe, a partnership model and why it's important? Why do you need something like that?
Well, I think an interesting way to answer that is to go back to some history and the original tension that led to HolacracyOne's partnership model. What some people don't know, the first version of the Holacracy Constitution wasn't a separate document from the legal operating agreement of HolacracyOne, the organization. The very first version of the Constitution, those were the same thing. We created a legal document that was our operating agreement, our actual bylaws of our legal entity, right? The legal bylaws that defined our capital structure for our equity and all of that stuff was the exact same agreement as the Holacracy Constitution that defined rules. It was version 2 that separated those two into two distinct documents. And going back to when we did that, we were just starting to look at maybe growing past the founders of HolacracyOne. And one of the things that I was really clear on, and I don't want to speak for Tom, but I think this was a very aligned point. Neither of us wanted employees, right? I'd had employees in my last business. I hated the idea of having employees again and everything that meant. That meant this class distinction between the owners, the founders, those with the equity, the power, the control, or whatever, and then the minions, right? The followers, the ones that are there to do the orders and the bidding of the owners who are in a clear class distinction there. So I went looking for a solution, and I did some of this research back in my software company before I even founded HolacracyOne with Tom, the initial research, and it was kind of a pie-in-the-sky idea, which was, what if we had no employees? What if it was legally everyone was a business partner with all the legal history and meaning and all that of a partner versus an employee? And so I kind of dragged that up again and sat down, and as Tom and I were looking at how to grow this and make the first formal operating agreement to capture the rules of Holacracy, said, what if we just didn't do employees? What if we just made everyone a partner?
We almost had one.
We almost had one, yeah. And it was And I just couldn't stand the idea of like starting to grow and formalize and have employees. Lex was a contractor for us legally in the beginning, and Tom and I were the partners. But I just felt all wrong to start growing with employees. So that's where it came from, and it was helpful. A no employee organization. Legally. I
also want to give Patrick a chance too to answer that question, and maybe like I'll use something that you just said. Patrick, is your sense as well that like we're talking kind of legal partnership structure? Is that how you envision what a partner model is?
Well, I can maybe. I mean, it feels weird to sit with you guys here in a panel because we're just entering this process, right? So maybe I can say a bit more about the tensions we sense, and they're very much aligned with what you just shared, Brian. So from the beginning, we also were pretty clear in our partnership as co-founders that we didn't want to be like a traditional company. We didn't want to have employees and so on. And at the same time, now we're in the process where, we grow, we bring on new people, we get approached by people that are, interested, attracted to our purpose. And at the same time, we don't really know how to do it differently, right? We have all these established structures and so on, but we know all the problems that they bring along, right? And so for us, it's really, we are looking out at the moment. We are trying to find better ways of doing that. And so we're working with Tom at the moment to build on the work that these guys have already done in a painful way. And for us, it's primarily to be able to work at eye level, right? To basically not have that class distinction. We also had this, not so nice experience last time where we were struggling as a, startup still, and we had a pretty difficult quarter. And we were faced with the decision that we couldn't pay ourselves salary, right? And we had one partner, and she was an employee back then legally, right? And so we just openly put that on the table, like, we're not going to be capable to pay ourselves a salary. And I think for us it was clear because we owned the company, and we said like, hey, we're going to invest, we're going to see this through, we still see the potential. But I think because we were the owners and she was not, for her it was a difficult decision. It was a different decision, right? It was a different kind of contract because we were paying her for the time she invested, right? And we couldn't uphold our side of the contract. And so even though we didn't, it wasn't like explicit, or we didn't want it to be that way. I mean, we were really treating her as an equal, I think. It really was not, right? Because we were the owners. Yeah. And so that was a very important experience for me we don't want to have that anymore.
That's a great, I realize I'm sitting on a bunch of questions, but I also didn't clarify. So I got kind of two little, rules of thumb here. One is feel free, panelists, to ask each other questions. And we've got a set amount of time. I'm not going to necessarily, use it all for myself. If you guys have any questions as we're going, feel free to raise your hand. We'll make sure we get you a mic, and we can just do that for the time that we've got.
Yeah, so if I can build on that, Patrick, I think one of the beauties for me about the Constitution is it does what Patrick said. It provided an equal and level playing field for all individuals that wanted to come together to express work in pursuit of purpose as partners. Super explicit what that meant, and a super explicit set of rules to define the interactions and the gameplay for that. But now you move over to the other context, the legal structure, the capital structure, and the ownership structure, and it's all a mess again. It's 200-year-old governance. It's 200-year-old structures. It's baked and seeping and soaked in implicitness, right? And this was driving Brian and I crazy in the early years, and really what inspired HolacracyOne to innovate even on the legal stuff. It's been kind of a silent offering, really. It's been posted on HolacracyOne's website forever. To illustrate how to encode some of these key self-organizing principles in other systems, other rule sets, like the legal operating agreement. And what that invites is a change of definition of ownership. This is huge.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does that then show up as it relates to holacracy practice kind of day to day? What are some of the signs of that difference?
Yeah, so we don't want power held personally. We don't want a privileged class. We don't want ownership to convey authority to Trump personally. So how do you do that? This is embedding new partnership structures in the legal system, just like HolacracyOne embedded partnership structures, if you will, in the Constitution.
Yeah, that's one thing. So one question, and maybe Brian's a good one to ask this to. So, like, how does this relate to the formerly 3-tiered, now 2-tiered partnership app and the governance? How does this, the legal structure, relate, these partnership models? Is that also a part of this?
Well, so, I mean, any organization, regardless of what legal structure underpins it, has to answer some basic questions like who can fire someone, right? Who can hire somebody, and other things like that about the relationship between the company and its people. What Holacracy brings is a way to govern the role work around that, right? Like, what are the roles involved in hiring, firing? What are the processes that people have to follow before they have the authority to make a decision around a hire or a fire or compensation or whatever. And then there are lots of different apps or ways you can do that, right? But there's then, I think, another class, so depending on what you mean by partnership. So one aspect of the legal structures that we have in HolacracyOne that Encode works with is it makes the legal structure itself, I think, more conducive to a partnership model. In an employment setting, there are laws you have to worry about. There's, how many employment laws we face in the US? And I think a lot of Europe's worse. My company's not subject to them. We get to dodge them all. We have no employees legally. We have business partners. So we get to totally ignore all the employment law of our jurisdiction, which is great because it's all 100-year-old backwards. It's stuff to protect employees from evil top-down control of a corporation, right? Or whatever. I mean, it's this weird protective body of law that's just not needed when people have real self-governing, self-authoring, control over their lives in a company. So you've got the apps around, how do you then structure all of this stuff? And some work better or worse, but the partnership legal structure lets you do those apps without worrying about all the employment law getting in the way, right? And also it's a psychological difference. It just aligns differently when, you get to show up and know that the legal relationship is in integrity with the stance of the paradigm the company's organizing around. Self-organization. Yeah, self-organization. It's so different than knowing, sure, we have governance meetings and roles and whatever, but I'm still showing up legally as an employee, and that carries with it all different meaning, and that fights it. You can do it without that. Most companies today are doing it without changing that, right? And yet it's a bit of a drag, a resistance that it adds. So the partnership models lets that go further. And then there's this whole other area, which is how do we form agreements among partners that aren't about the role work, right? Like agreements like, hey, sometimes we're going to get upset with each other. Maybe we want to have some agreements about how we heal when we get upset with each other, right? How we bridge that. Those are interesting things. And there's a whole suite of these that aren't really about the role work. You might have a role to get involved. You might have a mediator role or whatever. Sure, there might be roles involved, but there's still agreements you want. And this is where we're adding some stuff to Constitution version 5 that'll make this easier to deal with. But right now, it's not that easy to deal with. You can do it, but you work around Holacracy, really. And this is I think this rich territory of how do we, as humans, agree to work together outside from anything that affects our roles. So
what is that? Yeah, I was going to ask Tom or Patrick. And some of the stuff in code I know has been focusing on this.
Yes,
so what does that look? Yeah, what are some examples of what that looks like?
So it's to really dig in and begin to answer the question that Brian poses: how do we humans come together and work? So we've all talked about the bullets in the back or the arrows in the back that Holacracy gets on this topic. But it was never designed to keep the fusion there. It was designed to make a distinction. In fact, that's how I define Holacracy. All of us have gotten tongue-tied a bit on defining Holacracy. There's so many answers to that question. I have finally arrived at my very short answer. Holacracy is a complete wholesale replacement for management hierarchy, period. A complete wholesale replacement for management hierarchy, period. It is designed to express organizational work in pursuit of purpose.
Tom?
That's it. Yeah, thanks. So we've got that, but we have humans involved, and humans want to interact and relate with one another. They also expect to earn a living. They also might want to make an investment for a return on capital or to get some beneficial appreciation in the long-term value creation that the enterprise brings to the world. So how do we account for these different contexts? And this is how I think of it and how ENCODE is framing this question and digging into the problem. The organization is a context defined by a rule set, the Constitution. It is super clear. It is very mature. Version 4.1 going on 5, going on many more in the future. Awesome. This gives us a leverage point now to use 21st century governance, a very mature decision-making process, to upgrade these other two contexts so that we humans can come together and form human-to-human agreements about our interactions, as Brian was pointing out. And at ENCODE, we just call that a separate context, a collection of individuals that are like-purposed, that have agreed to come together and operate on some cultural norm. Cool. And then we want the exact same thing in the other context, the legal or the company context, that anchors our capital interests, our investments, and specifies a rule set, a rule of interactions around that. So it's kind of like back when I was practicing and teaching and coaching Holacracy, it dawned on me that there's these naturally arising spaces or contexts. And we've talked about them. DG pointed at them as well in one of their presentations. It's the same sort of thing, now bigger. So Holacracy made a distinction. We're now reintegrating these other two contexts to bake in the very same principles that we've grown to expect in Holacracy in the Constitution.
Awesome. Just a quick kind of check-in. So I can't tell if people are like zoned out or riveted. How many people here are owner in a company or a partner in a company? Raise a hand. Okay, good. That's a lot. Yeah, I'm kind of curious too, like for the people in the audience who have experience as well, working, kind of having had experience maybe being as an employee in a company and going off and starting your own company, those decisions about how to kind of set up the legal partnership structure, it has not been easy to do that in the United States. There's a lot of new stuff, being emerging. So I'm curious, like, again, like, what are some actual examples of what that looks like or how to make that happen for those who may be interested?
Yeah, I have a ton to offer there, but I don't want to.
Well, Patrick, yes, you did not that long ago. Yeah, so right in the midst of it.
What's happening in Switzerland?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing. So I'm still pretty active in the startup space as well, and especially also in the the whole teal community. And I think one of the things that I see there over and over again is that if you have these people, those people that are passionate about purposeful work, you kind of you dive into that purposeful work head over heels, right? And then you don't want to talk about the messy stuff about, like how are we gonna divide ownership and stuff like that. And so one of the things that I fall in love with Holacracy, it's that it provides a very, very elegant mechanism to make assumptions explicit, right? And I think that's a very important element to bring to those other contexts, right? To have a way to, what are the expectations that we have in terms of our, interpersonal interactions and stuff like that, ownership. And I think many organizations that are passionate about purposeful work, they're kind of tiptoeing around those questions, but I think they're really, really important to answer, right? And so I think it's really great that their models are being explored now, and that there's already a lot of stuff out there that we can build on to really not start from scratch. Because I think one of the main challenges that you have as a startup is you have to deal with so many questions, and usually if you have to make a decision, if you have to prioritize, you're focusing on the business model, on the business stuff, right? And then you're sacrificing these other elements, and they will come back and bite you eventually, right?
That's helpful. One thing I almost wanted to check my own understanding. So you've got the partnership legal structure, then you've got like some governance that maybe defines these different, like currently in HolacracyOne, we've got like tenured partners versus regular partners, and that provides some sort of distinction between levels of investment, right, which can be specified in governance. What I'm looking for, I guess, is like, again, what does this look like? Where does it show up? How do you kind of best capture it? We have a partner ledger where we capture some of these agreements. You know, as an individual, I can go and write one and request that others agree or not agree. I think it's those things that would be helpful as well to kind of better kind of understand what this all looks like.
Yeah, well, I can say tangibly, in any organization doing Holacracy, you're going to want to clarify what circle owns a domain property in the partner relationships, right? There's some circle in the organization that controls the relationship between the organization and its partners, its people. And that circle can then do things like hiring process, firing process, compensation, and all that, right? So first, you just got to locate it. What circle governs it, owns it, controls it? Then from there, you can start defining what distinctions do you need to start tying things to. So in HolacracyOne, we have this distinction between a tenured partner and a regular partner, which we've adopted in a policy that defines that, and it defines a process for how regular partners can be brought into the company, and then how they can become tenured partners if they so choose. So we've got process to determine all that. Then we have governance that links to it. So our firing process links to tenured partners. We have 5 tenured partners. There's a process for more to nominate themselves if they're interested and to assess that. And then those people in that category get to make decisions around firing and hiring as well. And so, I mean, that's just one tangible example of what that looks like. And all the while, we get to spend our energy doing that, trying to figure out how do we actually like really want to hire and fire for our unique organization without worrying about all of the legal norms and standards in our broader jurisdiction that we have to for employment law, right? Which is great. We get to totally dodge all that stuff. I can't tell you how much time I would spend as an entrepreneur in my last business trying to navigate and deal with all of the external bureaucratic requirements, right? And make sure we don't end up either sued or just violating and fined by some regulatory agency because we missed something in what we have to do legally to have employees. And all the tax withholdings and all the payroll complications, we don't do any of that. We just, here's your check, done. No tax withheld, nothing. You're a business partner, you pay your own taxes, you file your own stuff. We have no laws to worry about. We can interview people. When you interview people in the US, you have to worry about all things you can ask them and can't ask them legally for all these discrimination laws and all that. We're immune to them all as a partnership structure.
So this all sounds fantastic. I was going to ask, what's the reason to not do it, right? What are you?
Oh my God, there's so many reasons to not do it.
Not shift to a partnership structure, and then we have a question over here.
There's no court precedence.
We have a question.
No court precedence, right? Like, good luck. We will get sued at some point because of what we're doing. And we know that. And we're ready to fight that battle and ready to write a large check to a bunch of attorneys to figure this out. And then we are literally creating new precedent, right? Yeah, it's really cool unless you're footing the bill for it. One of us, yeah. Oh yeah, I would love it if one of you wants to get sued before we do. Please, that would be wonderful.
I'm signing up.
Yeah, it's great. Sue Tom, not. And sorry, Tom. Yeah, I mean, there's no precedent here. You're in legal gray area. I mean, it's an attorney's nightmare, right? Who knows how courts would interpret this? And then that would probably mean appeals because there's no precedent to work with, right? So, I mean, it's just a nightmare. Not to mention, so there's the risk involved in that, right? Then there's the non-standard nature. Like when any of us in HolacracyOne goes and applies for a mortgage, right? Good luck explaining to the bank, do you tick off the box of I'm self-employed or no, I'm an employee? Well, neither of those actually fits. You're a partner in a partnership structure, right? But not in a typical way. You might not even have a long-term equity stake in the same way. So everything's just different, and the rest of the world is not built to handle this distinction.
That's great.
Kind of like Holacracy in 2006.
Exactly like that, right? It's like you're interfacing in a totally novel structure with the world not built.
That's a great example. I also want to get to the audience question. Yeah, go for it.
Hi. Looking to make this a little bit more concrete in my mind, there's this question of ownerships as well, right? So in a traditional company, there's business partners and they are owners. Now you're saying everybody in HolacracyOne and maybe in Encode as well is a business partner. Does that mean that they are all equal owners? Or how does it work?
No, that would be not lining with reality. That would not be workable. So we're changing the definitions, actually ditching the notion of ownership completely and moving more towards investor, having an investment stake. And there, everyone can have a investment stake that is requisite to their needs or their means. So an investment stake might be holding an interest to get a little profit out in lieu of a paycheck or as a paycheck substitute. So you take a little profit for the work that you do and it goes in your bank account. You're still an investor. You're investing time, energy, and talent towards purpose. Cool. You might be another type of investor where you've paid in some capital to launch something and you expect a different type of return on that investment. The key here is all those classes of investors don't have personal privilege. They play the integrating perspective game. So they have perspectives on how their investment should be treated, but they don't have personal power to vote or trump their positions, like in a conventional organization.
Power does, the investment doesn't go with the control of the work.
It's decoupled, yeah.
And you can have different classes of ownership. You can have an ownership.
Can you hand the mic to him? I want to make sure just for recording purposes.
You can have an ownership interest that is technically, legally a class of equity, but that doesn't convey a right to capital appreciation, but rather a right to a profit share in the organization's profits, which can look a lot like a salary, right? So that's what all of the partners in HolacracyOne have, a class of equity that technically they're an owner. Legally, they have a equity investment, but that equity stake that doesn't give them a right to the growing capital in the company. It gives them a right to a share of the profits that behaves a lot like a salary with some variability in profit share. There's another class that behaves like a typical equity stock, that can grow in value and get dividends. And they might also have that, but it's a separate thing. But legally, they all have some stake in the equity of the organization to make that work.
And in any case, and in all those cases, the individuals who hold that property, who hold those investment stakes, don't have any special power or privilege over anything. They expect to have their interests well represented through maybe a cross-link to the anchor circle or some other means to channel tension into the system, but it doesn't give them any special privileges or rights. That's decoupled.
So is there still an owner, or is there that's completely gone?
In a self-organizing system that is pursuing its own purpose, the answer is no.
Great. Nick, yeah, you had a question.
So a couple of things. Just to echo what Brian was saying about how difficult this is because you're outside of conventions. I'm based in England and I'm a partner of HolacracyOne, and there's no boxes that I fit into whatsoever. It's a complete nightmare. Taxes, legal, attorney, immigration, all that kind of stuff. So that's just my moment of complaining about my nightmare. Secondly, question. It might be too early for this question, so feel free to shelve it. But I'm really interested in how this scales. This works well, I think, when you're dealing with tens of people, but when you go up into hundreds, thousands and tens of thousands, how do you see this model scaling?
Well, I've got some perspectives on that. So we do have precedent there. Partnership models are been around for a very long time. Legal firms, law firms, accounting firms, CPA firms, professional firms of all kinds are structured as partnerships, and they have partners in the tens of thousands globally. So partnerships scale. We have to figure out the mechanics and what it feels like to be in a partnership instead of being an employee, to account for the pain that Nick's feeling and to figure out how to orient to that new way of working. That's the scaling limit. It's not the structural limit. We're still using a structure, a holarchy, that scales beautifully. We have scalable investment stakes. That's easy to do. So the limiting factor is how we as individual humans orient to a new way of working. And yet another dimension, beyond just self-organizing the work, a la Holacracy, now making that a richer tapestry, a richer experience about earning a living differently and showing up differently with your co-workers, your co-purpose aligned workers.
Great. Olivier, I saw him first, but yeah, keep your, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to dig a little bit into this distinction between owners, between owners and investors. Because, and play a bit the devil's advocate, I hear when we work with organizations and they are owners, right, or investors, they do feel entitled to have control over the company. And, I really see their case, right? They have bought it and maybe they founded it. So I'd like if you could maybe speak a little bit to, well, why not? Why wouldn't they just control the company?
Well, they certainly have that option, right? And if that were the most effective way for them to meet their goals, whatever those goals might be, then great, do it. Do it the conventional way. I think the same question is, why would a CEO want to adopt Holacracy instead of just running it, as an owner would, top down, right? It's not always egalitarian reasons. It's just it works better, right? If what you really care about is expressing this purpose in a long-term sustainable way, then it works better. Or another way to think of it, there's a great quote from John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, who said, look, if all you care about is getting ridiculously wealthy, and you don't care who you step on in the meantime, right? You don't care what you do, you just want to get ridiculously wealthy, right? And you're running a company, the most effective thing you can possibly do is run a conscious, purpose-driven business, right? Because that's going to get you ridiculously wealthy faster than any other, approach. And I think this goes too. If you're an owner of a company, have an investment stake, and you want to get rich, and that's all you care about, the most effective thing you can do is probably run a really conscious, really effective, purpose-driven organization. And this is one way of doing that, right? It's saying, okay, well, great. Let's make sure people know the purpose governs, the purpose rules, and let's protect the organization even from my own ego and my bad days, right? Because we all have that. And as a founder owner who has top-down control, right, you have a lot of ability to mess with your organization when you have a bad day. I think putting control in the purpose instead of in the ownership gives you some protection from yourself for your own self-interest, right? Ironically, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, great. Another question someone's got? Yes, go ahead.
Hello one more time. This year, 2017, it was a Nobel speech about a theory of contracts, if you know. And I'm, as a mathematician, I know the theory of game, like the game theory, where also has a partner as an abstract. And in this game is very interesting stuff that partner is a temporary role. When you have the same purpose, you become a partner because it has a profit of being a partner. And then in some place, your purpose could change, or you're like not aligned, not on the same hand, and you stay not a partner. You could be even against each other. And in mathematics, in game, it's okay. But in a real life, if you're like owner, if you bank your money inside of company and you change your mind, for example, or change your purpose, you become face a conflict of the game, of the theory. I just want to hear your opinion on this. Like, if you are offering a agile system, yeah. So how you will face with a stopping being a partner?
You simply remove the person, right? This happened to me in my last company, my software company. Got to a point where I wasn't a good partner anymore. This wasn't aligned with my purpose. My interests were against the organization's interests. I was interested in distracting my organization with more development of Holacracy. The organization's purpose was not that, right? It was build software and other stuff like that. And I was hurting it, right? And the system ejected me, right? It made it very clear that I needed to get out, which is great. I get to go be a partner somewhere else, just gets rid of me. That can be a healthy, conscious thing, or it can be one side doesn't see it and the other side pushes them out. But if the relationship doesn't work for both parties, it's the wrong relationship, right? And so if the partnership doesn't work and you don't have organization and individual feeling in partnership, and the partnership serving both individuals, it's time to end the relationship.
Which brings a question for me too. So how does the partnership model impact? You've alluded to it a bit. I guess I want to hear a little bit more about hiring and firing, right? Entering or leaving that boundary, the relationship, and if you're now everyone's a partner, right? How does that impact those functions?
Yeah, in a big way, and I heard it mentioned a few times here already. I think it was Springist is looking. There's a vetoing role, looking for cultural fit. I don't think Ruben's here. But this invites a whole new way of thinking about these relationships that are purposeful. So we do talk about this, or at least did within HolacracyOne, about fit for organization being a role fit for the role, and fit for something else to be named. Sometimes it's organization, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's culture. There's that level of fitness. So looking at fitness through two lines. How well is the purpose alignment around the cultural fit? And how well is the work alignment around capacities and skills in terms of role fit? So it invites a new way of looking at who we want to bring in on the inside. What's fitness for this enterprise, expressing this purpose? What's the character and quality of individuals that are purpose aligned? This led me to kind of really be introspective about the conventional way of holding like-mindedness. It seems like that's a goal that folks are trying to achieve. I think it's the mistaken goal. The mistaken objective is not like-mindedness, but more like-purposed. So we don't want people of like mind. We want diversity. We want people that are holding a similar purpose and passion about expressing something new into the world. And then from a recruiting standpoint, assessing fitness to purpose, probably first, as Ruben said, he does at Xpreneurs.
Cool, that's great. Another question.
So maybe I understood wrong, but every partner needs to make an investment. Okay, because you said that that's the way you pay it, because they have an investment and they get a paycheck for that.
Well, yeah.
Is it time? Okay, and what is the benefit for them? I got it. There is a lot of benefits for the company. What is the benefit for the partner? I mean, I don't see. Can you give an explanation of the benefit for the partner of having this system?
Oh, do you want to do first? Okay, I'll go first. HolacracyOne staff, team members, right? Raise your hand if you work at HolacracyOne, please. Right? How many of you would really love to go back to being an employee instead of a partner? All hands dropped, right? It's for me, it's a deep psychological benefit, first and foremost. There are other practical benefits despite all that pain. Who wants to be an employee when you can be a partner? I mean, I think everyone probably has slightly different reasons for that, but what I see is clearly, it's not even a question. I've yet to find someone who's like, yeah, I don't know if I want that. I think I want to be an employee. I've yet to run into that person.
Although I will add, like the H1 partners who are not here, right? Some of them may have wanted more structure, right? Which is why they're not here to raise their hand or drop it, right? Right. So it is possible that sample. Yeah, a little bit of a bias sample.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Fair point by science.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, hi guys. First, I would like to say, I love Holacracy, but I'm raving about this side of things, and then that's for a particular reason. I've been active in the startup scene for a while, and I see a lot of organizations with shitloads of passion, and they're all looking for investment. And then they get the investment, and I think that's purpose killer, or actually not purpose killer, but purpose adjuster number one, because all of a sudden the purpose moves to exit and growth or in that direction. So that's also where my question is coming from. How do you see the world of VCs and the world of capital injection reacting to these ideas that will eliminate their ability to buy an operational stake?
Yeah, I just had this discussion. Who had the pop-up? Gils? Yes. So we talked about taking on capital. And it can be really confusing, one of those Gordian knot issues, right, of how to decompress or deconstruct it. But purpose is the key. What this does is it informs individuals about purpose investing, deploying purpose-based capital, not standard venture capital, expecting quick returns or quick exits or 10x kind of events, but really an eye towards mindfully deploying capital to accelerate the enterprise's pursuit of purpose and to embed dynamic steering principles in the deployment of capital. Capital right now is kind of still steeped in the old predict and control model. So an entrepreneur starts a business, kind of does some fancy predict and control, illusion of a control projections, 18 months out, 24 months out. This is our runway. This is how much capital we need. Now we go source that capital in one big old lump sum, usually, and off we go running towards the end of that runway. It's a terrible way to launch a business. So this kind of model, re-envisioning these partnership models and purpose investing, embeds dynamic steering principles. In fact, all the self-organizing principles into the deployment of capital. First, it's purposeful. Second, it's dynamic. Third, it's aligned to expression of purpose. And fourth, it doesn't convey any special authority or power to Trump. Pun intended, coming from the US. So it really reshapes it. And my experience, I get to speak like Brian does all over. There's conferences where there's traditional VCs that see the writing on the wall and they're beginning to experiment. They know the end is near with conventional deployments of capital. So they're looking at alternative ways to do that. We in this room hold a lot of answers that they're seeking on how to do that, which is really cool, I think.
Thanks.
I can maybe just add a quick anecdote to that. So one of our co-workers at the co-working space that we're working at is he's a partner in an impact investment firm, and so one of the challenges that they're facing is they talk to people that want to make impact-bound investments. They want to make a positive impact with their investment on, I don't know, social issues, ecological issues. The problem that they're running in at the moment is they're having a very hard time finding banks that kind of act as an intermediary so they're basically producing funds, but they're not finding. They've talked to, I don't know, a gazillion of banks, and they don't get it. They don't want to get it probably, and I think this is just another example of how all these questions are pushing against the boundaries of the status quo in many different dimensions. And I think probably, you're doing some work with blockchain and all of that, and I think probably there's more needed there to just kind of circumvent those existing systems.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
This is great if you're thinking within the boundaries of a single organization. Have you got anything to say about these principles being applied beyond the boundaries of an organization, across organizations, between organizations, to create some kind of meshwork of organizations in an ecosystem?
Thank you for that question, Nick. Yes, I've given that a little bit of thought. And actually, this is what inspires me, I think, the most. From one standpoint, what we've talked about are the mechanics, the legal structures, the capital structures, agreements between people. It's not so sexy, right, at that level. But what it enables, the expression, the evolutionary expression that it enables, is what's already happening in the world. People want variety. They want to show up and express their purpose, their skills and talents with other purposes they care about, unfettered. Freedom to shop for purposes and show up and energize roles, accountabilities, maybe even invest across multiple organizations. So if you just think about it, what Brian, Patrick, and I have talked about, if this comes into the world and it's already happening, you have a same similar legal structure that's encoding same similar principles. Cool, check. You have an organizational operating system that is encoding those very same principles to express work in pursuit of purpose. Nothing new to learn there. And a way of encoding the agreements and the relationships between the people, check. So we now have a system, a meta system, that allows anyone to shop for a purpose anywhere and say, you know what, I have a little bit of time, and I'm really interested in this purpose. Let me lend some of that time to this enterprise and show up and work. Nothing new to learn. So what I think this enables is a systemic, conscious, practical approach to having multiple work relationships across multiple enterprises with the same similar legal structure, the same similar capital structure, the same similar organizational processes. So this enables a lot. This is the really cool part. And I think it's how we all want to work. I always take my cues from David Allen sitting over here to my left. And when he talks about his work, it's an act of selfishness in one regard. It's the way he wants to work, right? And it's the way I want to work. This is how I want to work, and I think a lot of other folks want to work this way too. The freedom to choose purposes and low friction to engage in the organizations that you care about.
Amen. Great. Question over here. Oh, sorry.
Thanks. I was just curious. So I started my career at Arthur Andersen. So I was curious, as you bring on H1 partners, how you deal with the joint and several liability issue. Because obviously once you get sued, obviously that's what Andersen discovered. One bad actor can take out all the partners in a 100-year-old organization. So I'm just curious how you deal with that.
Well, we use a limited liability company structure, so a little different than a general partnership or what have you. And in that sense, I mean, if we did have a lawsuit, it would behave just like we were a C corporation or anything like that. It's separate, at least as far as our advisors have advised me. Separate legal entity, limited liability coverage. Now we do have some internal controls to make sure contract signing is done intelligently, because legally anyone could sign a contract for the organization. So we have internal controls to make sure that goes well. And other than that, it's all limited liability. So, there's no personal liability on the partner's part.
Thanks.
I mean, unless they do something that would breach that shield. And if they did do something that would breach that shield, then, well, the rest of us have some interesting recourse. But hopefully that never becomes an issue. We'll see.
Thanks, Brian. Michael, go ahead.
So I guess this is for Tom and Brian. So, Tom, you were just describing how this path that you're on, this evolution, is really about creating this structure and framework to support a gig economy. And the question I have is, as
Mike, can you put it a little bit closer?
Yes, I can put it actually in my mouth.
That would be too far. Just right in front is fine.
Just right in front. Okay. Different subject. So, have you thought of? So, as I think about that, sort of where this is going, it makes me also wonder about, particularly for HolacracyOne, as organizations are not selection, but Holacracy in general, how as organizations are looking at Holacracy. I'm wondering how the Holacracy practice and the Constitution, how that evolves, particularly in the context of this partnership structure and supporting a gig economy. And if the Constitution starts to evolve away from being relevant in organizations that aren't set up in this partnership model. And the specific example that comes to mind is like in 5.0, one of the ideas that's being contemplated is this ability to make purchases based on this, notify and instead of approval, and how much of that works because of the partnership structure versus how they may or may not work in an employee structure. And so I'm just starting to wonder about how does that Constitution, is there a risk in the Constitution evolving away from relevancy?
So as a role filler in H1 that kind of stewards what changes get accepted or not into that and drives a bunch myself, one of the kind of criteria or lenses I look at is keeping it as broadly relevant as possible, regardless of legal structure. And now that's never 100% pure or possible, right? So I at least want to make sure it can work in any legal structure, even if you have to adopt a policy, right? So like, for example, even in that case, you can always adopt a policy that says, no, actually, we're limiting how spending works further to, you have to have an official title. Zappos had to do this to fit within Amazon's, they're a public company, right? Public company controls around who can spend what, of course, by level and status in the management hierarchy and all that. And Zappos had to honor some of that to fit within some of their systems. So Zappos made a mapping, and that mapping, part of it was policy-based and governance. So I want to at least make sure that there's easy mappings that can be done to keep you completely compliant with what you'd have to for a employee-based legal structure. And actually, on the other side, there's probably some stuff in there that if you really have a pure partnership structure, you might want to expand beyond, what the Constitution even gives you by default. But yeah, I do think it's important that it stays generic. Ultimately, it's a tiny fraction of the companies doing Holacracy right now that are going to have these kind of partnership-based legal structures. And it's a growing number, right? We're at least under 10, and before it was 1, right? So I don't know, maybe somewhere around there, maybe more now, I'm not sure, but it's tiny fraction. So it's got to stay relevant more broadly. And yet I think it can serve both as long as it's flexible enough to allow some basic policies to further govern. We might actually see, if it keeps evolving in that general direction, a standard app, which is your employee-based legal structure app, which has a few policies in it that you adopt right from the get-go if you are in that kind of structure, to make it all compatible and compliant. We even have an app like that we published. It's our manager mimicry app that's basically creates roles for hiring and firing that are like manager role that can, based on level in the hierarchy, can fire people, to map to the conventional structures, at least as a starting point, and then you can evolve away from them to the extent your legal structure allows you to. So.
All right, thanks, Brian. Yes, and unfortunately, so the good news and bad news. Bad news is we're actually out of time. The good news, though, we're still doing a debrief, right? 15-minute debrief. Right, 15-minute debrief. So that's the good news. But before we shift into that, big round of applause for our panel.